All right, so hopefully your game has a little bit of life to it now with a little bit of creativity. Um, and before we move on to the next section or the topic of the video, your hierarchy is probably a mess, just like mine is right now. And if you ever ask me for help and your hierarchy looks like this, I am going to scream. So we can organize this a little bit better. There's no correct way to do it. It's just about organizing. So what I like to do is I like to create a empty game object, and I like to just call it environment. So anything that is part of the environment, I'm going to put as a child. You can think of this as a folder of some types, right? Just like you would have folders in your computers. We can use these game objects kind of like folders. And I'm going to make all of these blue. Some of them are prefabs, some of them are not. Actually, most of them are. I didn't really care about making the fence a prefab because those things are pretty static. And the reason I'm doing that is so that I can basically press this little arrow beside the environment, and all of that is just completely minimized because I don't really care about that stuff. I don't want to be sifting through it. And if you really wanted to take it one step further, you could create, under the environment game object, you could create another empty one, and you could call this one, I don't know, barrels, because I've got a bunch of barrels in my environment. So I could shift click all my barrels and put them kind of like a subfolder. So in my environments, I have all my barrels right here if I ever want to do something with them. Right? I could fence. So all of this jungle fence that I've made, I could just stick it in there, close the arrow. And let's do a couple more. Rocks. I got a few rocks. Stick them in there, close it up. And trees. So it's not imperative that you do this, but at the same time, now you can just close that out of sight, out of mind. And if you ever need to work with it, it's going to be a lot easier in the future now that it's all tucked away and organized. All right, but for the purpose of this video was to instantiate. And what does instantiate mean? Well, instantiate typically has to do with prefabs. It's when you have a prefab in your game, such as my bamboo or whatever your character is chasing. Instantiated is to basically spawn it. It's basically to create it into your game world. And as you can see, this bamboo is not spawning. It's already a part of my game world. And that's just not going to cut it, because in a game where I may spawn 10,000 or I may use 10,000 bamboos, it's just simply not enough I'm not going to put 10,000 bamboo in before my game is started. In fact, I'm going to put 0 bamboo in my game because I want to write code to create the bamboo for me. And the code is actually quite simple. I'm just going to move my guy up there. He's falling through the cracks. And we will have to write a script. Now, I'm thinking one step ahead. Me spawning bamboo is imperative to the game that I want to play. So it's basically a rule, spawning in the bamboo. It's something I want to keep track of. It's something it's part of the main game loop. And if you're a programmer, you might be familiar with that word. So I think it's finally time to create yet again another empty game object. And this game object is not going to represent anything physical in my world, but it is going to represent the game manager. So this is basically the referee. This is basically behind the scenes, all the code that we need to write to basically act and operate our game loop. So it's fine that it doesn't matter where it is, doesn't matter. You can just leave it at 000 if you want, doesn't matter. We're going to attach all of our scripts that basically operate the game loop to this game object, right? Because scripts are logic, but the logic does not run unless it's a part of something in our game. So a lot of the time we like to create this kind of invisible kind of all-be-knowing game manager game object. So I'm tempted to make a script that is specific to instantiating, but I know we're going to use this script and we're going to update it to do more than just that. Let's go and create a script so we can write some code. And a good name is probably just game controller or game manager. Don't put any spaces in there, and you can use capital letters at the start of both of those two words. And then it's clear and concise for anyone that's working on your game, or for me who's helping you, that this script is going to be part of the game manager game object, and it's really going to control the functionality of this game. And before we can play this game, we need to, well, the first thing we need to do is we need to spawn some bamboo. So let's go and take a look at how we can do that with our code. I do not need that. Now the first thing is we've worked with variables before, and we've worked with our floats, and this is our old script. So I guess I'm going to have to just open it up again here. There we go. Now, if you're interested in instantiating, or basically spawning in a prefab, just like our character controllers and our rigid bodies, all of our game components, we need to specify which game object we're interested in spawning. In this case, it's the bamboo. So the bamboo that's in Unity is already a game object, so I need to declare what type of object this thing is. It's a game object. And then I can give it any name I want. Maybe just for clarification, I should say bamboo prefab. I could just put bamboo, but maybe bamboo prefab is a better word to use in this case. And do I want to be in the start, or do I want to be in the update? Well, we'll get to the update later. Let's just keep it simple. So when I press start, when I start the game, let's spawn one of these bamboo prefabs. Now that, as the video suggests, is the instantiate keyword, right? That basically means spawn. And just like the other methods we've used, or the other functions, we need to give some more information to this particular one. So the first thing, if you guess what the instantiate method needs right off the bat, well, it needs to know which prefab you want to spawn. And in this case, it's the one we're calling the bamboo prefab. So that's the first thing that goes inside of these parentheses. The second thing is where you want to spawn it. Okay. And we know that anything in Unity, anything to do with position, has to do with 3D vectors. So for example, if I wanted to spawn it right where my main character is, I could spawn it in at a vector at 0, 0.31, and 0.33. Now, that's not a bad idea, and there's nothing wrong if you do that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to create my own vector 3. And I'm going to say this vector 3 represents the spawn position. However, I know what the spawn position is. If I really wanted to spawn at this position at 0, 0.31, 0.33, I should just write that in. So I'm going to say, well, I want the spawn position, but I know it's going to be equal to this new vector 3. And this vector has 3 coordinates, 0, 0.31, and 0.3. Yours will be different than mine, and that's totally okay. Now, hopefully you understand why you're getting these red squigglies under your line as if they're errors. And if you don't, your Visual Studio will help you and tell you that we need to know that these numbers are floats. So you're going to go 0f, 0.31f, 0.33f, or whatever the coordinates you're using are. So we had to do a little bit of backtracking there, but I'm ready for the second piece of this instantiate puzzle. I'm instantiating the bamboo prefab, and where am I going to put this? Well, I'm going to put it in the spawn position. And the third and final piece is the rotation. So where do you want your prefab to look when it spawns? And I might let you just do rotations on your own. I'm not too interested in which direction my prefab is spawning, at least not right now. So here's a word you've probably never seen before. Anytime you see the word quaternion, that is rotation. Just like vector 3 now means position to you, quaternions mean rotations. And which rotation am I interested in? Well, I'm just going to take the identity rotation, which is basically just the default rotation of your prefab. So however it looked in your Unity before you made it a prefab, or when you made it a prefab, this is just the default rotation. We're not doing anything funny. This is just like basically zeroing it out. Or sorry, this is more or less like multiplying by 1. So as long as you have these three things in a script, we can start to spawn and we can instantiate these prefabs. So I'm going to save this script. And I think this is actually the most understandable script or code we've written in this course so far. So hopefully you're not struggling too much with that. And now it's just about remembering how Unity works, because you might try to run your game and you'll be frustrated that nothing works, and maybe you know what's wrong. Maybe you should just pause the video for 5 seconds and see if you can hook up the final pieces to get this script work. In the interest of time, I'm going to try to get it set up myself. And I know we just wrote this script, but this logic is not going to operate unless it's on one of these game objects, right? These living, breathing game objects in our game. So who would have thought? I'm going to click and drag it over to the game manager game object. And this object will now be responsible for executing the logic. Now, hopefully you did that on your own, and you might be missing one final piece, and it's fine if you are, because I sometimes miss this quite frequently. In fact, I've missed it in the code, believe it or not, as I look into my game object script fields here. I forgot to make these public, because if they're not public, we can't access them through Unity, or at least through the inspector. So once you add them public, and once you go back into Unity, you now have these fields. You'll notice we need to identify which prefab we're spawning. I know I called it the bamboo prefab, but I haven't actually put a prefab in there to spawn yet. So hopefully your stuff is nice and organized. And I've got my bamboo prefab here. So I could click it and drag it, bloop, right in there. I could also just click this button and search all of my prefabs. And just a side note, your prefabs, if they're set up properly, will be a complete blue cube. All three sides are blue. I know this isn't the prefab that I set up because this is not a 3 blue-sided cube. This got some other stuff going on. Proper prefabs have nice, clean 3 blue-sided cube. So now, after all of that, you'll notice that there is no bamboo in my game. However, if I run my game, the game manager will now spawn a bamboo. And if I remember correctly, I needed to change the properties of my rigid bodies, such as the freeze rotation, so that it would stop getting all tipsy and turnsy on me. Hopefully you've already done that. And just like that, we've spawned a bamboo into our game. The bamboo is not moving. That is because my prefab doesn't have the script attached to it. So maybe I should go ahead and do that right now. What script was that? I think it was player 1 move. was player 2 move, as long as it was one of these. So in your prefab, you can actually search for your scripts. You can attach a logic. And I should have had that set up already, and maybe you didn't, just like me. So now you know for sure that your prefab should have the script attached to it, whichever one we made from days gone by. We're going to change that script here relatively soon. And there goes the bamboo. It's spawning in, and it still has some logic attached to it, which is a very cool thing. All right, now you know everything to know about instantiating, and that is almost, once you know prefabs and once you know instantiating, you know, you're pretty much ready to, that's kind of how Unity just operates, is on those two things alone, especially at the level that we're going to be operating at. So there you go.